my name is Allie Pierce, and I will be giving my speech today. I called my speech Another Perspective because I would like people to see this from the not as ordinary perspective and the perspective that won't get as much spoken about. I would like to start with a quote. If I wait for someone else to validate my existence, it will mean that I am shortchanging myself. Zanele Muholi said this, and he is a LGBT person, and I wanted to start with this quote because the topic of my speech today is going to be the way that forcing a sexuality onto a child can make them feel. And this happens a lot of times without people knowing that that's what they're doing. Because every time you walk up to a kid and say, oh wow, he's going to break a lot of girls' hearts, or that she's going to be a heartbreaker, or anything like that, you're pushing the idea that they're going to be straight or heterosexual. And that can be damaging to a lot of kids when they're LGBT, and that's not necessarily what's going to happen for them. And I think this is important to talk about because these kinds of things won't get better if we just leave them. LGBT rights have improved quite a bit, but it's not perfect, and it probably never will be, but there's no point in not striving for that. So, I would like to present this perspective of the topic, and I think that we really should stop pushing sexuality onto kids from basically the time that they're born. I just had a little brother born. Everyone's already said, oh, he'll be a heartbreaker, he'll break a lot of girls' hearts, he's going to be a player, things like that, which is already insinuating that he's going to be straight and have a lot of girlfriends and things like that, which there's no way of telling if that's going to be true. And pushing this onto a child can do a lot of bad things that are not really going to be in the best interest for the child, and it can make them not feel accepted when they are ready to come out. Before that, they have been trying to find a way to tell their parents, and then they finally do, and they're thinking back to all the times their parents were like, oh, have you got a boyfriend yet? Or, oh, I really think you could get a boy, that'd be cute, like things like that. And then you also have to think that if parents keep saying this, keep asking about a boyfriend instead of just asking if they're dating someone, keep asking if they have a girlfriend, keep asking if they're going to get a boyfriend, things like that, it's going to build up an expectation in their mind for their child to be straight, and then when their child comes out to them, it's going to be like, oh, well, that's not what I had in mind, and I don't know how I feel about that. And it's not going to be the best for them overall. The last thing is that with all this pressure to be straight in our society, a lot of people in the LGBTQ community will turn to unhealthy coping mechanisms such as alcohol or drug use. And this has been studied for multiple times. And first of all, to get a little bit more into it, I want to talk about how children will not feel accepted. Now, if you look at a few different sources, there's one on here that I wrote down as MD Edge. There are so many kids that don't feel accepted and so many kids that are thrown out and are homeless because of their sexuality. And they put all this effort into coming out, or they got caught and they were forced out of the closet, and then their parents don't accept them. And these kids are thinking about everything that their parents have said, everything that they've done, and they themselves aren't never going to feel accepted because this pressure to be straight has always been present. And that's just not healthy for the kid, that's not healthy for the parents, it's not a healthy situation, and it's going to tear a lot of families apart, where if you stopped asking if they had a boyfriend and instead asked if they were dating anyone, which is a simple switch really, it's one that we use still, it's just not as commonly thought of, then these kids aren't going to feel that same pressure. They're not going to think back when they're coming out and be like, well, she always asks if I have a boyfriend, so maybe I shouldn't come out because she's going to expect me to have a boyfriend. And if you use gender-neutral terms, of saying dating instead of like boyfriend or girlfriend, then you will have a kid who's like, oh yeah, I have a girlfriend or I have a boyfriend, and coming out won't be as big of a deal because it won't be as expectation for them to be straight. And I know that there will be people who are saying there will still be the expectation because of societal norms, but usually if there's an accepting family somewhere, the societal norms aren't going to be as pressuring, and if we can change the societal norms by introducing this slowly, then that won't be an issue in the future. And kids overall will be just happier. So my second point, which is parents will have expectations as to what they want their child to be, this can easily be eliminated if the parent doesn't speak their expectations out, because then the parents won't get their hopes up as much when they see their child's reaction to a boyfriend or see their child's reaction to the word girlfriend, and it'll overall be a simpler transition if their child comes out as gay or bi or pan. And then the parent won't be like, oh, well, I actually wanted you to be straight, and I've been vocalizing that, and I feel like you haven't been hearing me. And so that parent will be like, oh, yeah, that's fine. Like, I didn't specify one way or another, so I can't really have my feelings hurt over this. And another argument for that is that parents will still have expectations in their minds, which I am almost positive will be true, but without vocalizing these expectations, it'll be more comfortable for the kid, and the kid will trust the parent more, which will make the parent feel better about the situation, and the kid will overall be in a healthier home because the parent will be able to easily accept it. And if they can keep an opinion like that to themselves all through growing up, what makes you think they won't be able to when the child comes out? And I read an article on this from Focus on the Family, and the title is When Your Child's Sexuality Isn't What You Expected. And it was basically saying steps like this, like drop the gender neutral, or use gender neutral dating terms, and things like that, and just learn to accept your child, whether it's your societal standards, your Christian standards, or whatever it is. So this brings me into my last point, is that the pressure of being straight can bring some really bad coping mechanisms into the LGBTQ community. And that mainly is drug abuse. Teens in the LGBTQ community have much higher rates of drug abuse, and adults are about a third more likely to be drug users, specifically like marijuana and things like that. And I got this from drugabuse.org, which is the National Drug Abuse website, so that is a reliable source. And with these pressures, people are using something to make them feel better. They don't feel accepted in society, and they don't feel like their families accept them, and they feel like they've let people down. So they want something to make them feel good. They want a pick-me-up. And sometimes something like drugs or alcohol can do just that. And the argument that I've heard from this has come from my family, and they've said things like, oh, that's just going to be a problem in the community no matter what. Drug abuse isn't going to be something you can get rid of in a community like that. And I would like to say that that is not true. It is probably because of the societal pressures put on these people that drug abuse is already an issue. And if the societal pressures weren't there, then the expectation to be straight wasn't there, then having to use drugs would not be as common, and the expectation for LGBT people to use drugs wouldn't be as common. And all of this has a very simple solution, which I have introduced multiple times, I've said multiple times, which is stop using gender dating terms. If you don't use gender dating terms, then when a kid walks up to you and they're like, hey mom, I'm gay, it's going to be like, oh, okay, well, are you dating anyone? Instead of, oh, well, I wanted you to have a boyfriend. Boyfriend isn't going to be the first word that comes to mind if you're always saying dating, or if you're always saying like significant other or anything like that. Where significant other is a word that not as many people are comfortable with. So I think if you say, just asking the question, hey, are you dating anyone, would be a much simpler way to introduce everything. And if we go back to the quote at the beginning, if I wait for someone else to validate my existence, it will mean that I am shortchanging myself. So the community is learning to go forward without this, but think about how much help it would be if they didn't have to do this. If they didn't have to ignore the society around them just to feel comfortable with something that they cannot change, something that is a part of them, something that they should be proud of, but something they have to learn to be proud of. So the only downside to using a gender-neutral dating term, like dating or significant other, is that people just have to change the way that they're speaking. And it's not even a huge aspect of life. It's just like when you're looking at a child and saying, aw, that's going to be a heartbreaker. Like, you don't have to say that. You don't have to sexualize a child, because this child is not going to be in a relationship anytime soon. Then when you have your own child who is ready to be in a relationship, you can say, oh, are you dating anyone? Do you have a significant other? Instead of, do you have a boyfriend? Are you dating a boy? Did you find a boy yet? Things like that. It'll just simplify. It'll just make everything more simple, because overall, it's a simple change that could really impact LGBT kids' lives. And if you think about that change and just implement it little by little, because it's not going to be perfect the first time you try it. You're not going to be perfect the first time you try it. But just thinking little by little that, oh, I'm going to say dating. Oh, I'm going to say significant other. Then you'll eventually realize that these kids can do a lot of things when they're not scared to hide their sexuality from everyone, and they're not having to use drugs as a pick-me-up. And overall, it could be a really beneficial thing to just make a simple switch, and it could really change a child's life.